Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Tengku Nur Ilham binti Tengku Murad. The trade number 2020950861. And the other group member, which is Nur Syairah binti Ahmad Fazli, Siti Aisyah binti Azman, and Nur Fatih Antara binti Muhammad Anwar. So, insyaAllah today, our group will present about the use of Kifayah limit as a benchmark for measuring poverty for the purpose of zakat distribution and social impact. Alright, so there are three research objectives for this issue, which is the first one is studying the concept of hard kifayah and the element in the limit of kifayah. Second is studying the factor of zakat institution in Malaysia determining the limit of kifayah to measure the poverty of zakat distribution. And the last one is analyzing the limit of kifayah among zakat institution and issue related to kifayah limit in Malaysia. So I will present about the first objective, which is studying the concept of hard kifayah and the element in the limit of kifayah. Alright, so we move to the next slide about the definition of hard kifayah. Okay, so the first point is most zakat institutions use a financial approach in measuring poverty based on the hard kifayah method. The kifayah limit calculation method is very similar to the poverty line average, in that it uses income as a variable to determine whether an individual or household is poor or otherwise. The second is kifayah limit play a role in determining the level of need required by the household to meet daily needs. It is calculated based on various variables such as number of members in the household, age group, and other. There are several key components in determining the requirement of hard kifayah, which is shelter, food, clothing, health, education, and transportation based on Maqasid Syariah. However, it is up to each state zakat institution to determine the needs of each of these component. So the last one is aimed to facilitate the process of determining the hardcore poor, the poor from the non-poor. It means that the distribution of zakat should be at least adequate to the level of minimum cost of living and comfort for the recipient and his dependent. Okay, so we move to the next slide, which is about the element in kifayah limit. Okay, so as you can see, there are 6 elements in kifayah limit, which is the first one is food. The point is any food or drink consumed by the household. Food is included in the category of basic amenities of an individual life. The scholar of the Maliki school put the measure of need for this basic food is adequacy within a year, which is also a measure to determine the poor and needy. The second is shelter, covering the cost for providing the accommodation for the household, including house rent, utility bill, and other basic requirements for a living. Imam Shafi'i has explained the meaning of the necessity of life is life of an individual that must be within the hard kifayah, including protection or shelter for himself and his dependent. The third is clothing. Any type of clothing worn by the household, such as daily clothing, school uniform, work attire, and actually. So clothing is also as important and key thing in the life of an individual, because clothing is a necessity to cover the outright and avoid the view can lead to lustful desire. The fourth is medical. All form of medical and equipment taken by household, such as treatment, pill, and medication from pharmacy. Next is education. All relevant expenditure for education, such as school, college, university fees, boot, and actually. And the last one is transportation. Expenditure or transportation including fuel, monthly installment of the vehicle, bus, and or taxi fare, and actually. So the C element, which is the food, shelter, clothing, medical, education, and transportation, are the main element that are the measure and evaluation of determining of the rate of the hard kifayah. Okay, so I think that's all from me. Next, I will pass the presentation to Siti Aisyah to present about the second objective. Alright, so thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Siti Aisyah binti Azman, metric number 2020987711. So I will explain about the definition of asna fakir and miskin. So poverty can be categorized into two, namely absolute poverty and relative poverty. So first is about a measure of future poverty. Measures based on income and basic needs, such as food, clothing, and shelter, are measures of absolute poverty. The concept of absolute poverty does not consider the question of quality of life or the unfair distribution of wealth in society. Second is relative poverty. Relative poverty is seen through the relationship between the economic status of individuals in society in the context of income distribution based on ethnicity and the region. So the living needs of the people who are in the city are higher when compared to the people who are living in the countryside, and cause the income gap between them is very different. This also make urban poverty more serious than rural poverty, and the poverty line income, which is PGK, rate is also higher. And according to Imam Abu Hanifa, the faqih is the person who has the least wealth, and the poor is the person who has nothing from the wealth. And according to Imam Ghazali, the poor are those who do not have any property and only depend on part of the property for survival. And lastly, according to Imam Shafi'i, it is still considered poor and or needy for a person who has property such as a modest resident if the necessity for his life are not sufficient. So for a person who has a lot of property but is unable to make use of it because it is far away or there are obstacles that prevent him from managing or utilizing the property. Therefore, they are entitled to zakat distributed for the needs of his life until he returns to being rich and can manage and generate income from his property. So next is about the distribution agency and the zakat assistance scheme for asnaf faqih and miskin. So the zakat management agency AMZ in Malaysia is divided into two, namely the State Islamic Religious Council, which is MAIN, and the State Zakat Board, which is SZN, for the collection and distribution of zakat. Some zakat administration and the management states are fully managed by the State Islamic Religious Council, such as Kelantan, Terengganu, Perlis, Perak, Sarawak, and Johor. So zakat in Malaysia is still managed by the state religious leader, regardless of the name of the agency that manage zakat, which is either the Sultan or Yang di-Pertuan Agong for the non-monarchical states. Lastly is the zakat distribution scheme practice in Malaysia is not much different between the state, but it only differs in terms of the name of the scheme and the differ of the assistance. So the focus of each scheme is to help alleviate hardship, provide food and clothing needs, space to generate an economy, shelter and education for children. So the zakat assistance scheme provided by the state for the poor and needy asnaf have no significant difference when compared. In fact, there are similarities of a scheme, although the implementation and amount of assistance are different. So next is about the qualification criteria asnaf faqih and miskin. So MAIN and MZ have assessed the asnaf in determining the eligibility of zakat distribution and have taken several criteria. Among the criteria used are: first is Muslim. Islam is the main criterion on the distribution of zakat practice in Malaysia. However, according to Maliki and Hanbali scholars, for non-Muslim it aims to tame their hearts to Islam, which is called asnaf mu'allaf. However, according to the Shafi'i and Hanafi school of thought, zakat cannot be given to infidels even if it is intended to tame their hearts to Islam. This is because they argue that the law of obligation to distribute zakat to non-Muslim is when Muslims are few and not as strong as now. Therefore, some states in the distribution to non-Muslims, such as in the state of Pahang, it is mandatory by the Islamic Law Consultative Committee to use the property share from the Baitul Mal. Second is resident of permanent resident of the state, not involved for emergency assistance for cases involving supplies being cut off while travelling. This condition become a criterion practiced by all MAIN and AMZ determine eligibility as the recipient of zakat assistance. Next is the really poor and poor based on the property ownership, income and ability to work. Zakat is not obligatory but is haram if a person has a property and a job and is rich, except asnaf amir and mu'allaf. Therefore, The Kifayah limit is a method used to measure the eligibility of zakat recipients to ensure that zakat recipients are those who are truly deserving and categorized as poor and needy. And lastly is about the poverty and reason. According to Imam Shafi'i, zakat can only be given to people who are poverty, intelligent and able to manage property. Hanafi scholars also stipulate that zakat should not be given to children less than 7 years of age and insane people except to their guidance. So I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Shairah binti Ahmad Fazli. My matrix number is 2020984673. So I'm going to continue the presentation, which is related to our research objective, which is to analyze the had kifayah among zakat institution in Malaysia. So, first thing first, I will show you about the deduction of zakat and basic necessities that are contained in the zakat calculator for each state. So my dear friend, let's see the table 3 that state the types and kifayah limits for each state in Malaysia. So let's see first to the Wilayah Persekutuan state, which is the zakat institution of Wilayah Persekutuan have state the limitation for self expenditure is 12,000. Meanwhile, for wife is 5,000, and the children. Alright, so in Wilayah Persekutuan, they have categorized the ages of their children from 5,000 for IPT, for who studied in IPT, and 2,000 for 7 to 17 years old, and 2,000 also for 0 to 6 years. So as we can see here, it is quite different with the Selangor state, which is the zakat institution at Selangor give the limitation for expenditure for self is for 12,936 ringgit. Meanwhile, for wife, their zakat institution give a limitation for 2,172. And this is also, Selangor is also same with Wilayah Persekutuan, whereby they have categorized the zakat expenditure for their children, which is their children who studied in IPT will get the expensive 7,104. Meanwhile, the children who are not working, which is the 18 and above, which is they will have the zakat limitation for had kifayah for 2,172. Meanwhile, 7 to 17 years will eligible to get 4,008. Meanwhile, 0 to 6 years will get 1,740. And the OKU children also will get 2,688. And the Zakat Selangor have also give a deduction for child care costs. Okay, and also the Zakat Selangor also give a deduction for the chronic treatment or for medicine purposes, which is 2,664, which is different with Wilayah Persekutuan, which is Wilayah Persekutuan is not stated in their zakat calculators. Right, so let's say to the Perak state, which is Perak state have given limitation for self expenditure, which is 10,800. Meanwhile, for wife, they are eligible to get 5,000, and the children. Alright, so Perak is quite different with Selangor and Wilayah Persekutuan because the zakat institution in Perak does not categorize their children expenditure, which is every children will get 2,300 for 7 to 17 years or 0 to 6 years will eligible to get the deduction for 2,300 only. Meanwhile, the children who studied in IPT will get 2,800 for deduction in the zakat calculators. And also, Para also give the chronic treatment and or medicine purposes, which is 2,400. Alright, so let's move to the Negeri Sembilan, which is Negeri Sembilan give a 9,000 had kifayah for self, which is lower than other state. So meanwhile, for wife, their zakat calculation in their zakat calculation give a limitation for 4,000 for wives in Negeri Sembilan. Meanwhile, Negeri Sembilan is quite similar to Perak because they are not categorized their children expenditure, which is every children who is 0 to 17 years will get 2,000 for each person. But however, the children who studied in IPT will get 8,000, which is higher than Perak. So, meanwhile, OKU children will get 6,000 deduction for a zakat calculator. So, Negeri Sembilan also does not give a deduction for housing, for car, and for education children or own. So let's move to the Malacca, which is Malacca give 8,000 of hard kifayah for self-expenditure. Meanwhile, Malacca is quite different for expenditure for wife, which is the Malacca state just give to the not working wife. Meanwhile, the working wife are not eligible to get a deduction for zakat calculators. So, alright, let's move to the Pulau Pinang state. Alright, Pulau Pinang also give 9,000 for self-expenditure, which is similar to Negeri Sembilan. And for wife, they give 3,000 hard kifayah for their wives in Pulau Pinang. So let's say to the children of Pulau Pinang also will get 1,000, which is similar to Malacca, which is they are not categorized the ages of their children's expenditure. So let's move to the Negeri Kedah, which is Kedah gives 10,000 for self-expenditure and 4,000 for wife and 2,000 for children per person. So in Kedah also are same with Malacca and Pulau Pinang, which is they are not categorized the ages of the expenditure in their zakat calculators. So let's move to the Perlis. We will go through one by one. Alright, so Perlis has stated 8,000 for self-expenditure and for wife is 3,000. Meanwhile, the children in Perlis also will get 2,400 for each person. Perlis also similar to the previous state, which is not categorized the ages of their children. So, however, Perlis in Perlis, zakat institution in Perlis give a deduction for housing, for car, and also for education for children and education for own. So it is quite good for Ma'ins in Negeri Perlis because they have give a deduction for car, for the asset like car, housing, and so on. So let's move to the Pahang. So Pahang give 14,400 for self-expenditure, which is higher than other state in Malaysia. So let's see that the wives of Pahang will get 3,000 of hard kifayah, and also their children also will get Pahang has categorized their self for children expenditure, which is they give 4,200 to the children who studied in IPT, and also they give 2,400 for the children who is 7 to 17 years and 3,600 for 0 to 6 years. Alright, so let's move to the Johor, which is Johor gives a 9,000 for self-expenditure and 3,000 for their wives. Meanwhile, their children will get 1,000 per person. In Johor, also quite similar with Perak, Negeri Sembilan, Malacca, Negeri Sembilan, Malacca, Pulau Pinang, Kedah, and Perlis, which is they are not categorized their expenses for their children. Alright, so let's say to the Terengganu, which is Terengganu gives a 9,000 for their self-expenditure, and for wives they will get 4,000, and the children in Terengganu will get 2,000. Alright, for 0 to 6 years, 7 to 17 years will get 2,000. Meanwhile, the children who studied in IPT will eligible to get a zakat deduction for 8,000. And the Terengganu have give a limitation for OKU children, which is 6,000. And also, Alright, let's say here, Selangor and Kedah, they are not give a zakat deduction for parents. But however, in Selangor, in zakat institution in Selangor, they are not stated for expenses for parents. But however, the people in Selangor can put the expenses of their parents in the column of children which is in 18 and above. So I think here are the issue in Selangor. Maybe the people in Selangor do not know where to put their parents' expenses because of lack of information in zakat Selangor for parents' expenditure. So let's move to the Kelantan. Kelantan give a 12,000 for self-expenditure. Meanwhile, for wife, they will eligible to get 3,000. And also, Kelantan also quite same with other state, which is does not categorize the ages of their children, which is their children will get 1,000 per person. Meanwhile, in who is studied in IPT will get 4,000. Alright, Kelantan also does not give a deduction for the asset like house, like car. Alright, so let's move to the Sabah. Sabah will give a 9,000 for hard kifayah for self and also 4,000 for wife. And the Sabah also does not categorize their expenditure for children, which is their children will get 2,000 ringgit per person. So let's move to the Sarawak. Sarawak give 8,000 for self expenditure and 3,000 for wife and also 1,000 for their children. And Sarawak also same like other state like Sabah because they are not categorized their ages of their children. So after we see the differentiation of data of hard kifayah collected and analyzed from table 3, we can say that it have a critical irregularities involving the type and rate of hard kifayah in the practice of calculating zakat income by ulama in Malaysia. So I think ulama need to be examined their expenditure to provide the equality to zakat payers as the accuracy of kifayah limit expenditure. That's all from this slide, and I'll pass this presentation to my friends.
Thank you, Nur Shahira, for your presentation. Assalamualaikum and hi to our respected lecturer, Miss Rauda binti Muhammad Ramli, and my fellow friends. My name is Nur Fatin Atira binti Muhammad Anwar, and my matric number is 2020987557. So I will continue this presentation about issues related to kifayah limits in Malaysia. The current method of distribution of zakat in Malaysia is still unable to solve the issue of poverty in the Muslim community due to several factors. Okay, so there are two factors and let's see the first one. The first factors is the difference between the cost of living in urban and rural. The measurement of zakat poverty, which is hard kifayah in Malaysia, is based on the poverty line without taking into account the difference between the cost of living in urban and rural areas. Most academics recognize the importance of the adjustment between the cost of living in urban and rural areas in studying poverty. Therefore, in determining the poverty line for urban and rural areas, the factor of cost of living difference across these areas should be taken into the account. Okay, so what is urban poverty and rural poverty? Urban and rural poverty are two different phenomena according to the World Development Bank report. A total of 495 million urban poor in 2010 comprised the low and middle income groups. If viewed in terms of percentage, urban poverty has a lower number compared to rural areas. However, the impact of urban poverty is more felt than in rural areas. For example, a person living in a city lives in a stone house and has a car and a motorcycle. Yet, they have a large number of dependents, high cost of living, especially rents, transportation, and various basic necessities and services expense. So, another example is in urban areas. The percentage of urban household expenditure is more focused on non-food items such as housing, transportation, and education. Contrast to the rural areas, they only focus on foods. If there is a surplus, then it focuses on non-food items. In addition, the pattern of poverty in urban areas often involves debt, either with banks or financial institutions, while in rural areas, their poverty does not involve debt. Okay, so in turn, rural poverty exists due to the neglect of the agriculture sector, which is the largest economy contributor to rural communities. The result was debt problems, unfair division of land, farming on land leased from others, which results in low production, low income, low level of education, and low standard of health. So let's see about the second factor, which is amount of existence based on gender of head of household. In most cases of poverty in the world, most households headed by women are at very high risk of being in poverty. Women heads of households often have more responsibilities other than managing family and children, which makes them less time for others' activities. In other words, they experience time poverty and their needs are not the same as those of men. So, what's the factors of poverty among women? So, let's see together. The first one is female households generally have more dependents and have a higher proportion of non-working family members compared to men household heads. The second one is women typically have a lower wage compared to men, besides they have less access to assets. The third one is women typically bear the burden of household chores, resulting in time and mobility constraint compared to men household heads. In addition, most women heads of households are senior citizens who have energy constraint to work. They also have a low level of education and influence the type of work done by them, as most of the types of job undertaken do not require high academic qualifications. In terms of employment, women are more involved in informal economic activities that contribute to low incomes. Okay, so that's all from me. Thank you.
Hi, back again with me. So for the conclusion, I will conclude that zakat is one of the main economic resources for Islamic countries. So the efficiency and the systematic management of zakat is able to boost the potential of zakat as the development for Muslim. So the optimal of the utilization of zakat fund is really indeed to improve the quality and the potential of every Muslim. So as we can see here, we are in Malaysia. So the administration and the management of zakat is managed by the Islamic Religious Council in each state, which is called as Ma'in. So Ma'in is responsible in determining the eligibility of recipient as well as the form of assistance that is appropriate to the background of each recipient, so that the assistance provided can be utilized as much as possible. So as we can see here, Ma'in needs to review the differences between urban and rural, and also the difference between the gender of household needs in the zakat calculator, in determining the hard kifayah in zakat calculator. So we actually found that there are something that Ma'in can improve in the method of calculating zakat in order to produce an accurate calculation of zakat, so that it will help more people who are needed. So I think that's all from me, and I thank you for your time, and thank you.